How's it going, Bill? Welcome to another adventure that we call the Investor Guys podcast. And you know what? I told you last episode that we were like at 53 or 55 or something like that. So officially, I've restarted we've caught up, literally caught up to ourselves now. So I've restarted everything, playing again. So if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook or anything else, these new episodes will actually say new episode in front of the description. And that way you'll know the new ones versus the ones that we've already recorded. And by my calculations, if we keep knocking out 2 of them a week like we've been doing, we are about 11 or 12 weeks before we are out of the ones that we're replaying and into new ones, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm sure that they really don't care about that. That's a me and you thing. So
Yeah.
Everybody, thanks for being here. Just go over to investorguyspodcast.com. All the episodes are archived there, and catch up, get back in them.
And review too. I mean, a lot of this stuff, you're gonna start doing something. You're gonna say, you know what? I seem to remember Bill and Kevin talking about that. Go back. This is reference material for you, and it's always going to be up, and you're always going to be able to get it for no cost whatsoever. So save your podcast if you're listening to them on a platform, and if you need access to our actual, shining happy faces here, you can find that on the YouTube channel, and you can also find that on investorguyspodcast.com. But let's get down to business here, Bill.
Yeah,
we have been doing. What's that?
For both of those, make sure you hit subscribe and like.
Absolutely. And share. I mean, feel free to share. We've got a lot of people who do watch parties as well. Thank you for those of you who are doing watch parties. Feel free to do the same. We have been doing a series, 4 of them so far, on inspecting properties before you purchase them. We've been talking about what to look for, what to be aware of, not so that you're not having a reason to purchase the property. This is so that you can understand a fair offer when you first go in before you get your property inspector there who's going to go through with a fine-tooth comb. So where do you want to start up? Because I think we've covered the curb appeal.
Yep.
We've covered from top to bottom as far as roof and foundation.
Yep.
We covered a little bit of electrical, and I think we're probably ready to move into the property. But one of the things I wanted to say real quick, and this has to do with where you're buying properties and the types of properties that you're buying. Some of the things that I look for in Cleveland, where I buy a lot of multifamilies, and they're mostly duplexes, sometimes fourplexes. I want to know, it doesn't matter whether I'm going to make an offer on the property, it doesn't make a difference, just the value for me. A lot of these duplexes and even fourplexes will have a single water meter. And I will have to figure out, if I'm going to divide it by 4. And that's not always fair, because sometimes we've got somebody who's got 3 kids and they're taking baths all the time. Sometimes I've got somebody who's single and they're never home.
Yeah.
So what I will typically do is I'll do what's called a sub meter. So we've got a master meter, and then I'll put 3 subs on, say, a 4 unit. So I want to look when I'm coming in, first of all, if there's a single meter or not. And I check also for gas and electric. Usually they have separate gas and electric, but I want to check for all of that. And then I also want to see, when I'm touring the property, if there is a water wall. And Bill knows what a water wall is. For those of you who don't, especially in older buildings, there's one wall where they've run the water up. The kitchen is, especially if you've got like a duplex that's on top of each other, or fourplexes, you've got 2 units on top of each other. It's basically a mirror image. So the wall where the water is for the kitchen is a water wall. A lot of times the other side of the kitchen or off to the corner will be the bathroom. So that'll be the water wall. It makes it easier to put a sub meter in there. So those are some of the things that I'm checking again. That has to do with the areas that you're in, little things that you need to be aware of to check. And also has to do with the strategies that you want to actually play out with that particular property. But be aware of that in addition to the stuff that Bill and I are talking about.
And on that water wall, when you're out looking even for flips and just property that you're going to buy a single family that's not going to be Section 8, that's going to be traditional rental. Uh, if you're looking at a duplex or you're looking at an older property, a lot of times I've got a property right now that was built in 53 that we're redoing and rehabbing it. And one of the things that I looked at when I was looking at it was, okay, it's a 3-1. Well, you and I both know that's not a great configuration. You want to have a 3-2. And so I looked at two things. Was there room to put another bathroom? But mainly, where was the existing bathroom and where were all the water lines run? Well, the water lines are typically, as Kevin was saying, run in one wall. If I can maneuver on the other side of that wall, I can put another bathroom in. And I take that into consideration when I'm looking at the property because it's much more valuable as a 3-2 than it is as a 3-1.
Yeah, and again, not just for rentals, not just for Section 8. I'm doing the same thing on the vacation properties that we're looking at right now, because obviously a vacation property that is going to be 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, 1 bath is not going to be as desirable as a 2 bedroom, 2 bath, or 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 3 bedroom, 3 bath. So older homes where I am, make great rental properties because they're closer to the beach, because they started building earlier, closer to the beach. So a lot of them are older homes. But yeah, keep all those factors in mind when you're going through. And again, we're not doing this so that we're finding reasons not to purchase the property. We're doing this so that we have a reasonable idea of what we're getting into and a good offer to make on the property. So let's move inside the house. Tell me some of the things that you look for when you get inside.
Well, let's just do like we did on the outside, and let's go top down. So on the interior, one of the first things I want to be looking at is the ceilings. I'm looking for, do I see any water stains, new or old? And that's going to be directly tied to the inspection that I've done on the outside of the roof. So I'm looking at, okay, my roof may look fine, but then I get inside and find that there are water stains. Now there's 2 possibilities for that water stain. If it's a single story, then it's roof. But also if it's a 2-story property, where is the stain? If it's on the first floor, is it possible, and more than that, even likely, that stain is from an overflow from the bathtub or sink upstairs? If there happens to be an upstairs laundry room, you want to look at where that water's coming from. And so I'm always looking at the ceilings. Do I see any water stains, new or old? And with that,
time for a break, and I'm ahead of you on that. And we'll come back and we'll talk a little more about ceiling stains. Exciting stuff. See you in a minute.
Are you dumb enough to be rich? Well, are you? Bill Barnett's critically acclaimed book, Are You Dumb Enough to Be Rich, is a personal account of Bill's own journey to becoming a real estate investor. In his book, Are You Dumb Enough to Be Rich, Bill shares his experiences, insight, and advice in a well-written, easy-to-follow account that gets investors thinking and acting. Find Are You Dumb Enough to Be Rich on Amazon and other outlets, or purchase your copy directly at www.investorguyspodcast.com.
And we are back. And just before we took our break, we were talking about ceiling stains. And Bill, I know he was already getting to this, but I'm going to beat him to the punch. Just because there's a stain on the ceiling doesn't mean there's a problem. It means you should check and see if it's still a problem. It could be from a roof that has already been fixed. It could be from a leak on the roof that's already been fixed. It could be from a bathtub that overflowed in the bathroom, which isn't an actual plumbing issue. It's a negligence issue that somebody had. But those are all things that are easily checked. And seeing that ceiling stain gives us a starting point for doing a little bit of investigation and narrowing down the causes and or see if it's already been fixed. So.
Yep. So yeah, and ceilings are pretty simple. You're looking at that. Every now and then you're going to have a hole in a ceiling or a piece of sheetrock that may bow down, and that could easily be from somebody.
You locked up there, Bill. I'm going to go ahead and there you go. You locked up. What'd you say?
I said you may find a bow in the sheetrock. It could be from somebody misstepping while they're in the attic, or it could be a shifting issue. More than likely, it's a misstep. And I've had more than one contractor fall through an attic, whether it be all the way through or just a leg, doesn't matter. You still got a big hole. And it's an annoying repair, but it's a simple repair. And that pretty well takes care of ceilings from my standpoint. What about you, Kev?
A couple of things I check for, depending upon the age of the property, I look for sprinklers. And if there is a sprinkler, I want to make sure that the sprinkler system is still functional, see if there's been any maintenance that's been done on the sprinkler system, especially in commercial buildings. I have purchased commercial buildings or made offers on commercial buildings that I eventually purchased and found that there were sprinkler heads in the ceiling, but they weren't actually connected to anything. How they got away with that, how an inspector didn't catch that, I don't know. But those are something else that I look for, sprinklers. And in a lot of newer residential properties, you'll also see sprinkler heads. So I keep an eye
on where you are, and it depends on the size of the property.
Yeah.
A lot of times, you're not going to find those typically in small homes. But sprinklers, good thing to take a look at. Smoke detectors, and look, I'm replacing all the smoke detectors. That's a matter of course. They're inexpensive. And the biggest thing, they may work perfectly fine. There's not a whole lot to go wrong with a smoke detector once the battery's good in it. Is simply the plastic yellows with age, and that's not an attractive look. So I'm replacing all of those. They're $20 or less a piece, and I'm replacing all of those. So I would say let's go into light fixtures.
Actually, while we're on smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors as well, I buy the sealed units. They're good for 10 years. They've got a 10-year battery. After 10 years, you throw them away. So what a lot of people don't realize on smoke detectors is the sensor will actually go bad over time. So it detects particles that are in the air. It doesn't actually smell smoke or anything else. It actually detects particles. So if you shook a thing of baby powder by a smoke detector, it would actually go off. If you've probably seen this before, Bill, guys working in the house and there's a lot of dust and the smoke detector goes off and everybody starts freaking out because they're wondering where the fire is. It detects particles in the air. Now that sensor will go bad over time. So what I do is for $20-$30, I buy the ones that are sealed. They last for 10 years. I make a note on that property, or I have the property manager make a note on that property to replace that at the end of that 10 years or just before the end of the 10 years. And I buy the exact same thing for the carbon monoxide detectors. They have a 10-year, and I think they have a 15-year one also. I do the 10-year because I really don't trust the battery to last 15 years. I just don't believe it. So I buy the 10-year ones, and a carbon monoxide detector, for those of you who don't know, it needs to be near the garage for sure. But if you have an interior gas furnace or a gas hot water heater, you need to have one there also. So, but that's me on smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors.
And as cheap as those things are, don't be a cheapskate.
Yes.
Put extra ones in, make sure that you've got plenty. Look, your fire department at no cost to you will come out and walk you through the house and say, here, 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 and here. Basically, you want to have one just inside the door or just outside the door of every bedroom. You want to have one in the kitchen. You want to have one in the living areas. But the fire department will come out and again, not only will they do it at no charge, they will be happy to come out and do it. They appreciate your awareness of that, and they'll come out and say, here you go. And they would much rather come out and tell us where to put the smoke detectors than come out and put a fire out.
Yeah. And for your carbon monoxide detectors, they have ones that plug into the wall and they have ones that just you screw into the wall. Now, these are self-contained, they have the batteries. I always screw them to the wall because I've had tenants who will actually take them on their way out, whether it's intentional or not. And it's not a big deal because they're only $20, but to have to send somebody back out to buy them and put them back on again because somebody took it, it's more trouble than the $15, $20 to replace it. So what do you want to say real quick before we head into another break? These shows get away from us. I think we just need to.
Yeah.
do more shows
I was just going to say, let's get into light fixtures.
Okay.
And the biggest thing I have on light fixtures is don't have to go crazy on them, but try to carry a theme. So in Texas, we put ceiling fans in all the bedrooms and in the great rooms or family rooms because temperatures get kind of crazy. So we do that that's a matter of just standard procedure. So we're doing that all the time. So I'm buying the same fans. I'm always buying 52 inch. I'm not buying, even if I have a smaller room, I'm not buying a mini fan. I'm buying a real fan. I put those in. I want to have the same thing because I want the same metal finish, whether I'm doing chrome or nickel matte or Venetian bronze, the oil rub bronze, whether I'm doing that. And gosh, Kev, I've started seeing in new upper end houses, brass come back, which just makes me want to change my house.
I was cringing and thinking about it, but yeah, the shiny brass, I've seen that too. It's everything goes through cycles, unfortunately, even the stuff that we don't like. But yeah, and I've seen some really cool chrome and stainless steel fans that look like the front of an airplane or a jet engine or something like that. Just they've got a lot of really cool things out there. One thing we need to remember in everything we do for any property is don't overdo it. If you're talking about a house, a lot of times these properties that I'm buying in Cleveland were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I'm not going to stick a ceiling fan in there that looks like the front of a jet engine. It's a cool looking fan, but it just isn't going to go with the property. So let's go ahead and take a break real quick, and we'll be back for our final segment on this edition of the Investor Guys Podcast.
Are you dumb enough to be rich? Well, are you? Bill Barnett's critically acclaimed book, Are You Dumb Enough to Be Rich, is a personal account of Bill's own journey to becoming a real estate investor. In his book, Are You Dumb Enough to Be Rich, Bill shares his experiences, insight, and advice in a well-written, easy-to-follow account that gets investors thinking and acting. Find Are You Dumb Enough to Be Rich on Amazon and other outlets, or purchase your copy directly at www.investorguyspodcast.com.
And we are back for this final segment of house inspections for this particular episode. I think we've got another episode or two that we're going to be able to get out of this one. Light fixtures.
We're not going to get through this today.
When I'm checking light fixtures, and you're talking about replacing light fixtures, a lot of times I'll check and I will leave like probably the nicest looking light fixture there and then try to match something similar for the rest of the rooms. I check the switches. A lot of times you walk into a room and there's more than one switch, and one switch might work and the other switch might not. Now that may be something as simple as they used the wrong switch. They didn't use a two-way switch, or it's not wired correctly, but it could also mean, I'm sorry about that. It could also mean that there's something wrong with the wiring. So I will get that little detector out that we talked about a couple episodes ago, and I will check that light switch, because when you flip the switch on one side, it is supposed to put reverse polarity and it sends a signal to the other switch. That's how it works. So if I turn one light switch off and the other light switch is not turning it on, I should be able to detect a signal, an electrical signal at that switch. If I'm not, it means that it's wiring and I've got something that I'm going to have to open the wall up for. And I need to keep that in mind for when I make the offer. It may only cost me $150 or so, but if I've got 20 of those things, then that adds up, and I need to make sure I include that in the offer. As far as light fixtures go, I also want to make sure that they are current and updated and don't look like, somebody put them up. I have seen all kinds of crazy things. I have pulled light switches and electrical outlets out and found that people wired them with speaker wire, of all things, just because someone didn't know. They knew ground and live, and they put it in the speaker wire. That is a recipe for disaster. So I'll check things like that if there's a way to do that. Moving on.
One of the things that, the last thing I'll say on fixtures, and this is not just light, but this involves plumbing fixtures, door hardware as well. I want the same finish throughout my property. So if I'm going with, I use a lot of oil rub bronze. It's starting to get a little long in the tooth, but I'm currently still using that. And I'm using a little more nickel matte now with all the grays that have come in. But if I do a nickel matte, then what I want to have is I want to have my light fixtures with that same finish. I want to have my doorknobs and my door stops, my hinges. I want to do all of that stuff. It's small detail that raises the level of professionalism in your property. So when a buyer comes in, they don't come in and go, oh, this has a high level of professionalism. They come in and they just get a good warm feel that, wow, this was done right. And sometimes they can't even put their hand or their finger on what it is, why it makes them feel that way. But a lot of those things are these little detail pieces that professionals take care of that hobbyists, amateurs, dabblers do not.
Yeah, and doing walkthroughs as an agent, even with buyers, I've had people say things like, something just seems off, and it will be something like they've got polished brass doorknobs and they've got stainless steel light fixtures, and it's something as simple as just things not matching, not being congruous. And we mentioned this before in one of these episodes. In fact, we are designed to find patterns. We're designed to find symmetry. We're designed to find things that work together. So when something doesn't work, they may not realize it right off the bat, but that will be it. I've walked through houses and it bothers me. I'll see different types of doorknobs, and it may not even just be, brass doorknobs and glass doorknobs and bronze doorknobs. And sometimes it'll be a handle that you lift, like this, and sometimes it'll be an actual doorknob, and here and there, maybe for a closet or something like that, it's not a big deal. But when every other door has got a doorknob that doesn't match, or they're all rubbed bronze, but they're different styles, it's something that people do notice, whether it's subconsciously or consciously. So absolutely do something to pay attention, to see what's going on and make sure that everything kind of matches. And this period as well. Where Bill is, a lot of the houses are newer. He's saying 1950s being an older house. A lot of the houses I deal with in Cleveland are late 1800s, early 1900s, and those are considered newer houses some places, So it's, a mid-century that Bill's talking about, that's modern for some of us. But make sure it matches, especially if you're going to keep that mid-century feel to it. And there's a lot of great looking mid-century ranches where Bill is that look great, except for the orange shag or whatever else. They look great the way they are. They still hold up. They used a lot of knotty pine, paneling on the inside. They used a lot of stone and brickwork on the inside. All that stuff still holds up. A lot of people love that look. Make sure that you keep that theme running through it. You can get rid of the avocado green countertops and appliances, and update it, but keep the house congruent. And I like to try to be true to the original house as well. I like to try to keep as much of the original character of the house in place without just doing the whole facelift and changing the whole thing. To me, it's just being respectful to the property.
And you mentioned the old shag. Now, I haven't been in a house. Think about when shag was 60s. I had been out in a house in years and years and years and years that still had shag in it until last week. I walked into a house that had orange. Of course, it was like black orange now, but still had orange shag in it. And I was cracking up. I had to think of my brother, Kevin. I was like, Kevin would get a kick out of this. It had orange shag, and I bet it's been 4 or 5 years since I've been in a house that had shag in it. And I go in a lot of houses.
What's funny is I actually in Cleveland and even down here in Florida, because we have a lot of older people here, I will walk into houses that still have shag, that burnt orange or that green, that lime green, sometimes red, blue, shag that's just, and you can actually see where the shag is almost a Berber from where they walked in and out of the doorway and everything. Some people, it's not that they love the shag, it's just that they don't want to pay to replace it. They're just cheap. And that's fine. If they're living in it, that's fine. That's going to be top of the list for any of us to get rid of the shag. And it used to be popular. I remember when people used to put it in the vans. They used to actually put it up on the walls of the ceiling of the van,
whatever somebody does for their personal residence, and you always want to keep this in mind, what they do for their home while they live in it, everything is available. I don't care what they do. When you and I buy it as investors, whether we're going to turn it into a rental or whether we're going to flip it, what we're looking to do is have the highest amount of appeal to the biggest number of prospective buyers. So when something, I live in the TCU, the Fort Worth area, TCU's right down the road. And so we get a lot of accent walls in properties that are purple, because TCU's purple and white. So that's fine for the people that live there. That's not fine for prospective buyers. They may, hate purple, or they may hate TCU, and they come in and go, ugh, and it's one wall and it's paint, and you want to have the biggest, broadest appeal you possibly can. You want to have as many things working in your favor and eliminate anything that might turn off a prospective buyer. I looked at a house this past week that the front of the house is that late 60s ranch, about 2,300 feet, very common around here. And I'm like, okay, this house is overpriced for this, and the square footage, just looking at the outside of the house, doesn't look right. And I walk into the backyard, and they have a 2,000 square foot log cabin built separate from the house in the backyard. Gorgeous structure if it were somewhere other than the backyard. Wow. You're going to see
it's crazy.
Yeah, you're going to see some weird stuff out there. And if you want to learn about inspecting property, one of the greatest things you can do is go look at about 50 HUD houses. You'll see every possible type of rehab that could ever need to be done in the area that you live in. You'll probably see in about 20 houses, but the degree of upkeep in a lot of those properties is varies top to bottom. So you're going to see a lot of repair work that needs to be done. If you start thinking anytime you're looking at it, and again, we don't care whether you're talking about rental, Section 8, or you're talking about a flip, every repair is simply a line item. It is not good, bad, don't do it, yes, do it. It's just a cost item. I have to get all my cost items together and let the numbers tell me whether this property makes sense or not.
And again, it has to do with making sense. And one of the things I want to point out is don't cheap out. Okay, if you're looking at a heater that needs to be replaced, and you think, you know what, this is maybe good for another year or two, replace it. Don't cheap out, because what will happen is you will get a reputation, and especially if you are flipping houses in a particular area. And I know this because I talk to home inspectors and I talk to city inspectors, and they will literally say, oh yeah, there's a flipper who did that one. No one's going to, no one in their right mind should buy that house. Unfortunately, somebody will, because they don't know. Okay. Don't cheap out. If it's not going to make sense to do it the right way, the way you'd want to put your name on it, move on. There'll be another deal. Just let it go. It is not worth cutting numbers and figuring out where you're going to shortcut, what you're not going to do correctly, just to make a deal work. And then one other thing to keep in mind, this has nothing to do necessarily with inspecting, but just while we're thinking about it, your final exit strategy on your property. And I say exit strategy, it may not actually be that you're getting out of the property, but your use for that property. It could be that you're flipping it, but it could also be that you're going to keep it for cash flow. There's a difference for what you're going to want to do for both. So if I'm keeping a property, I want to do a more durable flooring. I'm going to do tile. I'm going to do a hardwood. I'm going to sand the hardwood if it's got hardwood there. I'm going to do a vinyl that looks like a hardwood. If I'm selling the property, I might put Berber into it. There is a difference for how we do properties that we're going to keep and how we do properties that we're going to flip. If I'm going to flip this property, I might use something that just looks good but isn't like top dollar. If I'm going to do something that's going to be something I'm going to keep, I'm probably going to do commercial grade, especially for my lock sets, my doorknobs, my plumbing fixtures, everything else, because it's going to hold up longer. They typically hold up 20 years or longer versus something that looks shiny and trendy that a homeowner will probably replace in 5 or 6 years anyway, because that's the way homeowners are. So just keep those things in mind. We are once again running way long. But we will see you probably for one more of these home inspection ones. And we've got a long list of other topics that we're going to do. We are headed into the holidays. We have one more of these to do before the holidays. But for those of you getting ready for the holidays, happy holidays and happy investing. And Bill, I will see you in another day.
My brother, good talking to you as always. Thanks everybody for joining us for another InvestorGuysPodcast.com.
Thank you for joining us.